Okay, guys, welcome once again. I'm Scott, and this is another episode of my lecture. I'm going to take you through the law of evidence, and I'm just going to continue from where I left. I earlier on talked on the functions of this law of evidence, the basic concepts, the definitions of terms, and types of evidence. So today we're going to look on the relevance and admissibility. And relevance and admissibility. What is relevance? Relevance is that relevant evidence is relevant if it has the probative value. Those evidence which have the probative value are called relevant evidence. And admissibility, we are going to talk mainly on this admissible part. So admissible part is that evidence which a court will allow to prove the existence of facts in issue. So we are going to look on the res gestae doctrine and some section, various section of the Evidence Act if time will allow us. So we have four divisions of this res gestae doctrine, and res gestae doctrine means transaction, facts forming part of the same transaction are considered under this res gestae doctrine. So it has five divisions. Number one is statements made by participants or observer of an event, statement concerning the performance of an event or an act, statements concerning the emotions or the performance emotions, performance emotions, and the statements concerning the physical sensation. So these are just under the res gestae doctrine. So this res gestae doctrine doesn't really form part of the same transaction, but the purpose of this res gestae doctrine is to allow other evidence of importance that to be admitted in court to build on the case or to give that probative value to a case. Because I said to win a case you need to prove the facts in issue. They are the most important things to win a case, facts in issue. But we have other facts like the res gestae under this res gestae doctrine that can be admitted, and they just add the probative part or chances of winning a case. And we have other evidence that the court cannot allow, like hearsay evidence. You are just recording what other people evidence. But you have other instances where the court will consider this hearsay evidence. These instances are what or we called that are the ones which are covered under this res gestae doctrine. So yeah, so under this res gestae doctrine, we are going to look on the four divisions. The division number one, statements concerning the participant of the event, and the case law here is the case of R versus Bedingfield, and this case is where the wife was cut, the throat of the wife was cut by the husband. So this wife went on running and telling people, see what Bedingfield has done to me, see that Bedingfield has cut my throat. And while she was running, she died, and she collapsed and died. So the court was to determine whether this was by the wife formed part of the same transaction. Do you understand? So the court is to determine whether these words, in other instances, if you're not to prove this res gestae doctrine, that this evidence will be considered as hearsay. But we are providing scenarios whereby hearsay evidence may be admitted in court. So the court was to determine whether the words of Bedingfield's wife formed part of the same transaction, but the court said that these words did not form part of the same transaction because they occurred outside the place of murder. That part, the spot, they are trying to bring out that aspect of time to prove the res gestae doctrine for the admissibility of evidence. So we have other cases like the case of R versus Ratton, whereby this evidence will be considered as bad laws because their R versus Ratton is being proved differently from what is being held here in this particular case. We have also another case of the Republic versus Ramadan Ismail, and this is a case whereby a father was accused of beating a boy or was accused of murder. And this father, in his defense, was claiming that this boy was epileptic and he died due to epilepsy. So that is the case of R versus John. No, that is not the case that we need to look at here. So we have another case of just to prove on the first doctrine statements concerning the participant of an event. Let me pause a little. I confused, or I told you different facts. You saw the case of R versus Ramadan Ishmael talks of it's a rape case. So Ramadan Ishmael, this is a case whereby a girl was raped. So the girl went to the father and told the father that he took the father to that spot where she was raped and told the father that, "Father, this is Wana." So just trying to inform the father that Wana raped me. So the court was also to determine if we are talking on the transaction thing, the res gesture. We are not talking on the divisions of the res gesture. We're going to look on them later. We are talking on the res gesture doctrine, which confirms the transaction part, the issues forming part of the same transaction. So the court was to determine whether this was statements made with the father, if the father could or should appear in court, were these statements made to him part of the same transaction? And the court said that they didn't form part of the same transaction. So we have the case, these two cases, R versus Bedingfield, R versus Ramadan Ismail. The court still relies on the same thing. They did not form part of the same transaction because of the elapse of time, because when the father was told was on different times with to when the action happened. So we have the case of R versus Stepper, and this is a case whereby there was fire in a shop, and it was like the owner of the shop was seen running from the shop, and this person was asked him, "Why are you running while your shop is on fire?" And the court was also to determine whether it formed part of the same transaction. And this case, the court ruled that yes, it did form part of the same transaction, because the words were spoken during at the time when the fire was burning. So this is a different case from those of Ramadan Ismail and Bedingfield case, and the court ruled differently because it did form part of the same transaction, therefore it was admissible. But the other two evidence were not admissible. We are talking on the admissibility of evidence, and under the res gesture. We are just talking on the relevance and admissibility, as I said earlier on. The evidence which can be admitted, which one cannot be admitted, which ones are hearsay evidence, and all that other evidence which the court cannot admit. And we are just talking on basically on the relevance and admissibility part. So we have this case of R versus Ratten, and this is a very common case in the evidence law. And this R versus Ratten, this is whereby the court declared that the case of Bedingfield, the case of Ramadan Ismail were bad laws, and this is a case whereby there was a struggle between a husband and a wife, and the husband was murdered. The wife was murdered by the husband by a gun, but this husband was defending himself and claiming that the gun had fallen off accidentally, and she didn't intend. But the wife, while the husband tried to murder she was making a phone call, trying to make a phone call, and we had a lady at the telephone operator. This is another lady. She's not part of the same transaction. No, she's not at the event or where the murder is happening. It is not forming part of the same transaction, but we'll see what the court will say on this res gesture doctrine. So the wife was trying to call the police, and so this girl at that telephone operator, the girl at the telephone operator was called as a witness, and she was saying that yes, there was this phone call whereby the wife was trying to call, and the emotions under which the girl or the wife expressed herself were of, it was like she wanted assistance from the police. So the husband or the defense side were saying that this evidence should be scrapped off because it is hearsay evidence, but the court ruled that because of that aspect of time, and the court ruled that yes, even if there is no, even if time is not there is much time between that when the event occurred and that after the event, but we need to look at the emotions, or what are the emotions that this wife is expressing as